in this presentation. Ooh, what did I do? Okay. You still see my screen, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry. So yeah. So I was saying, well, thanks for the invitation, and I hope you will find this joint project with Gabriel interesting. I know you know Gabriel already, so I don't need to present him. And well, this is a project on gentrification and its relation with high-speed railway connections, as the title suggests. Okay, so let me get to the material. So, well, first of all, we are obviously talking about gentrification, which is yeah, you're probably already familiar with this concept, right? So basically, by gentrification, we mean a process whereby a city, or usually a part of a city, a neighborhood, gets increasingly inhabited by individuals that have high income, higher than average income. And so while the quality of life in that neighborhood tends to increase, at the same time, the neighborhood gets less and less accessible to individuals that are of low or medium income, which gradually get displaced. They get to move out because of the increasing housing prices. And this issue is, you know, it's quite widespread throughout the world. Here you have a couple of pictures that suggest indeed that this is a process that is going on in several places, and it's relevant from an economic and social point of view for a number of reasons. So first of all, from an economic perspective, we care for it because of redistributive concerns, right? So this is a process that favors obviously the, let's say, the rich, or anyway the high income, and has a negative impact on the low income individuals. So it has a regressive distributional impact. There are obviously also strong social tensions, and also sometimes political tensions that are associated to this process. Indeed, here you see people protesting against gentrification, and also there is the fact that often gentrification comes with the displacement of local communities that were living in those neighborhoods, possibly for a very long time, and that brings to loss of social capital, loss of social cohesion, and also social fabric. Okay, so we care about this process for a number of reasons. Now, like I said before, gentrification is not a new concept. We're not discovering it, but we care for it in this particular paper because we want to look at a particular instance of gentrification, which we think has not been explored so far. This is called second-hand gentrification. This is a term that we didn't invent. We borrowed it from the press. But essentially, by second-hand gentrification, we mean gentrification that is not spreading only within a city, but between different cities, and in particular from large to mid or small-sized cities. And there are many examples of this phenomenon happening throughout the world. For example, we have cities in East Germany, like Leipzig, that are apparently getting increasingly gentrified from people that move from coming from Berlin. Cities in the southeast of England, like Brighton and Hastings, that get increasingly gentrified because people move down there from London. Other examples include cities like Hamilton, close to Toronto, and relevant for the talk that I'm giving today, the case of cities in the west of France, like Bordeaux and Rennes, getting increasingly gentrified by people moving in from Paris. And here you have several examples of this particular topic being discussed in the press, in the political debate, and also from NGOs that are particularly concerned about the distributional aspects that I discussed before. Okay, so typically when we think about this process of second-hand gentrification, the idea is that, yeah, we have these, let's say, high-income individuals that used to live in large cities like Paris, moving to smaller cities in search of maybe a better quality of life, maybe a quieter life, less stressful, more space, lower housing prices, and so on and so forth. But at the same time, you know, we have concerns from the natives of secondary cities about these gentrifying trends. Okay, and as an example of the kind of social tensions that I was mentioning before, Here you have some stickers that were posted in the city of Bordeaux in the second part of 2017. That suggests indeed that people were not happy with Parisians moving down there. I mean, I don't need to translate probably here the what's written here, right? I mean, Parisian just go home. And I think this is relevant, not just because it suggests indeed this unrest, this social tension, but also because clearly here you see that there is a connection with transportation mode, in particular with the new HSR or TGV line that in 2017 was opened between Bordeaux and Paris, or it was completed in 2017. Okay, so and this sort of motivates our story, as you will see. Okay, so I won't spend much time, as you will see, talking about previous literature. But I can tell you, you might know if you have worked on this topic, that there are already several studies looking at gentrification. These studies mostly look at gentrification as an intra-city process. For example, as being linked to building renewal cycles or the provision of new amenities like I don't know, stadiums or shopping centers that trigger this process of gentrification of certain neighborhoods. We are interested in gentrification as a phenomenon that affects multiple cities and that spreads from one city to the other. And this is like a novel approach in this sense. And we think this is interesting, not just because it's novel in itself, but also because the fact that there are multiple cities involved may bring to some not obvious distributional effects. Okay, so for example, we would expect higher housing prices in, let's call, secondary cities, Bordeaux, Rennes, or the other examples that I gave before, which affect the low income negatively, but maybe there are also less intuitive effects. For example, because if indeed high income individuals that used to live in the large city or the bigger city move to the secondary ones, maybe the pressure on the housing market in the large city is reduced. Okay, and this may have an impact on housing prices there, which may possibly also benefit the low-income individuals living in larger cities. Okay, yet overall, our perspective, I mean, our assessment of the literature is that we know very little about the mechanisms that are behind this phenomenon of second-hand gentrification and also its distributional effects. So that's why we think this is an interesting topic to study. So by the way, I didn't say it before, but I'm happy for you to interrupt me. So if there's any question, just let me know. I don't know if I can. I don't think I can see your hands raised, or if there are any. But feel free to stop me at any time. Okay, so what do we do in the paper? Like I said, the idea is to study whether and how gentrification spreads along intercity transport connections. Okay, so between different cities, and in particular looking at the role of intercity transport connections. So to investigate this issue, we are going to use both theoretical and empirical investigation. Okay, so from the theoretical side, our paper proposes a model of two monocentric cities that are inhabited by heterogeneous individuals, particularly individuals that have different skills, with commuting or travel both between and within the cities. So basically, the key idea of the model, as you will see, is that essentially when you provide an intercity transport connection, like for example a high-speed railway line between a primary city like Paris and secondary cities like Bordeaux and Rennes, what you're doing is you're essentially making the primary city more accessible to individuals that live in secondary cities. Okay, so you're making for example, the job market in the primary city more accessible. Okay, and the idea of the paper is that well, this greater accessibility is for several reasons. We are going to focus in particular on job-related issues, but you could also think of others. So for several reasons, this accessibility is more valuable to the high-skilled individuals than it is to the low-skilled individuals, and that's what triggers the gentrification process. Okay, but yeah, you will see this more in detail when I introduce the model. Okay, so the model will deliver certain predictions, and then we are going to try to test these predictions using data from France. The key policy issue that we focus on is the opening of the extensions of the French HSR high-speed railway network connecting Paris to Bordeaux and Rennes in July 2017. And the data that we use is data on the housing market, looking at the universe of housing transactions in France between 2014 and 2020, and also looking at information, data about migration and commuting flows at the individual level. Okay, so just a very brief preview of the results. So we're going to find that indeed the opening of these HSR extensions led to a significant increase in housing prices in Bordeaux and Rennes. But we also find, quite interestingly and possibly less intuitively, a negative effect on housing prices in Paris, or I mean, not through the entire city, but in particular in the area of Paris that is closest to the HSR station that is affected, i.e. Paris Montparnasse. We're also going to find evidence of increased migration of skilled Parisians from particular that area to Bordeaux and Rennes after the opening of the HSR line, and also an increase in the share of skilled workers that settle in the central parts of Bordeaux and Rennes, again, we think caused by this opening of the HSR line, which is overall consistent with the predictions of the model and with the idea that indeed the opening of the HSR line led to increased gentrification of the central areas, in particular of Bordeaux and Rennes. Okay, so this is the paper in a nutshell. And now I'm going to go a little bit more into the details, unless you have any questions or comments. Okay, so briefly, okay, so yes, before I do that, just to give you an idea of this policy shock that we look at. Okay, I mean, I'm sure I don't need to explain the map, right? I mean, you all recognize this, the country. This is Paris, and this is Bordeaux, and this is Rennes. So until July 2017, Paris and these cities were connected with a railway line that was only partially high speed up to these points here. And then in July 2017, the line was fully upgraded to high speed with a reduction in travel time between the cities in the order of about 1/3. Okay. So yeah, like I said, I'm going to skip the discussion of previous literature. I hope you don't mind. If you have any comments or questions about that, I'll be happy to come back to it. And let me introduce the model. Okay. So we have a theoretical model with two monocentric cities indexed by I, so city 1 and city 2. There's going to be a primary city, which is, you may think of Paris, and a secondary one, which you can think of as Bordeaux or Rennes. Okay. So these cities are inhabited by two types of individuals, the skilled and the unskilled. And what's the difference between these individuals? It's their wage. Okay, so we assume that unskilled individuals have a lower wage than the skilled individuals. And we also assume in the baseline version of the model that for the unskilled, there is no wage premium from working in the primary city. Okay, so whether you work in the secondary or the primary one, you get the same wage if you're unskilled. But for the skilled individuals, there can be a wage premium, which is, we think, consistent with the evidence on wage premia and how they are differentiated across skill levels for large cities. Okay, so as a skilled individual, I earn a higher wage if I work in the primary than if I work in the secondary. And okay, so in the baseline version of the model, this is a closed system. Okay, so the population is exogenous, the total population is exogenous, but individuals of each type can choose which city to live in, where to live within each city, and also where to work. Okay, either in city 1 or city 2. Okay. So this is a very stylized spatial structure of the model. Okay, so the two cities are monocentric, so you can both think of them both as basically a line with, on one end, the central business district, the CBD, where everyone works, all the jobs are located there. And so suppose that I'm an individual that lives in city 2, and I go to work there. Okay, so I work in city 2. So what I do is say I live at distance X from the CBD, then I have to commute regularly there. And my commuting cost, my time cost of commuting, that's what we consider in this model, is given by T, the time cost per mile or per kilometer, times X. Okay. Suppose now that I'm living in city 2, but I go to work in city 1. Okay, so what I do, then I still have to commute to the CBD. So I still have to sustain this cost T times X. But then once I get to the CBD, I catch the train that takes me to city 1, okay, in particular to the CBD of city 1. And the cost of this travel, cost of this connection is denoted as K, okay? And this is the key parameter that we're going to play with, okay? So when we look at the introduction or the effect of the introduction of this high-speed railway line, we are going to basically reduce this parameter K and see what this does to the equilibrium of the model. Okay, so the model allows for a very, in principle, it allows for a pretty flexible pattern of choices in terms of where to live and where to work. Okay, but to streamline the exposition, and also because we like things to be as simple as possible, we make certain assumptions in terms of what individuals do depending on where they live and where they work, and which we think are consistent with the overall structure of the model. Okay, so first of all, suppose that you are an unskilled individual, or consider an unskilled individual. So if this individual, this individual will never commute long distance, will never travel long distance, will never in particular work in a different city than the one where the individual lives. Why? Because there's no wage premium. Okay, so if I live in city 2, there's no point going to work in city 1 because I won't earn a higher wage by going there. Okay, so if I am an unskilled individual, my income is going to be given by the wage times 1, which is the exogenous time endowment, minus the time that the individual spends commuting. Okay, and it's only short distance commute. Okay, we have a similar thing for the individuals that are skilled and live in city 1. Why? Because even though there is a wage premium, they already live in the city where they get the highest wage. So there's no need to go to work in the secondary city for them. Okay, so again, their income is their wage times 1 minus TX. Now, what about the individuals that are skilled and live in city 2? So for these individuals, we assume that they may go sometimes to work in the primary city. Okay, so the idea being that by working in the primary city, they can get better, business opportunities, better job opportunities. Or you can also think that, they have an office in the secondary city, but their company headquarters are in the primary. And so from time to time, they have to go because of meetings that they have to attend and so on and so forth. Okay, so we are quite agnostic in this sense. We just assume that for the skilled individuals living in city 2, there is a share alpha of work days where they go to work in the primary city. So they basically travel long distance. And for a share 1 minus alpha of days, they just work in the city where they live. Okay, so for a share alpha of days, they will earn W1S, so their wage working in the primary city, times their time endowment minus the cost of commuting to the CBD minus the cost of long distance commuting. And for 1 minus alpha days, the commuting is only short distance. Okay. Notice two things. Notice that this alpha parameter is exogenous. Okay, so we don't, like I said, we want to keep things as simple as possible. So we don't really model this choice of alpha. It could be done, but we don't think it would significantly change our results. What's really important here is that alpha is not zero. Okay, so it could be very small. So it could be that these skilled individuals in city 2 go to the primary city only very seldom, so not often. Or it could also be that alpha is very large. Okay, so they basically go every day. That doesn't really matter for the results that I'm going to show you. The important thing is that alpha must not be zero. That's the only thing that we require. And that we can also allow for a lower wage when commuting long distance. The only important thing is that the skilled individuals earn a higher wage than the unskilled. Okay, so that's really the key assumption. Okay. So, yeah, so just to conclude the presentation of the model, in this model, individuals only care about their consumption of a generic good. And this consumption is given by their income, which I presented before, minus the price that they pay for renting housing. So in this model, we assume that all housing units have a fixed size, normalized to 1, and they're all homogeneous. So basically, the price paid for housing only depends on where the housing unit is located, both in terms of which city, I, and which location within the city, so X, the distance from the CBD. Okay, so these are basically the key components of the model, and of course we're going to have the usual trade-off that, you know, if you want to live closer to the CBD, then you're going to pay higher housing prices, but you also have less commuting cost. Okay. Okay. So let me now explain the basic mechanisms and the basic workings of this model. And I hope I'll be able to do it just using this graph. Okay. So the graph that you're seeing here shows you the pattern of land rents, housing prices in the two cities, primary and secondary one. Here, I mean, pattern of land rents in terms of how the price of housing changes with respect to distance from the CBD, right? So, I mean, here what you see is something that's very standard, right? So as we move farther away from the CBD, the land rents, the housing prices go down. And what this graph is also telling you is that in this model, we have also full income sorting. So it means that in both cities, in this model, it's always the high skilled ones, the ones that have the higher wage, that live closest to the CBD, whereas the poor, in a sense, are always further away from the center, which we think is somewhat realistic for the kind of cities that we have in mind here. I mean, it would be probably less realistic if we were thinking of, I don't know, cities in the US, but for Bordeaux, Paris, etc., it seems quite reasonable. And why do we have this? We have this because of the difference in value of time. Okay, so the idea here is that the high skilled individuals have higher wage, and so they also have higher value of time, so they're willing to pay more to live closer to the CBD and save on commuting time. Okay, so the fact that you see lines in bold and solid lines here, the idea is that the bold lines represent the pattern of land rents after we reduce the cost of commuting long distance between the cities. Okay, so this parameter K that I was explaining before, as in, for example, if we introduce a high-speed railway line, okay, between the cities. So let's look at what happens first in the secondary city. Okay, so you see that, well, what's happening is that, first of all, housing prices or land rents increase everywhere in the city. Population also increases. And what you see is also that the area which is occupied by the high-skilled individuals expands, okay? And it's in particular in this area, the one that, in a sense, you can say gets gentrified, where previously the low-skilled were living and now the high-skilled individuals are living. That's where the housing prices increase the most, okay? So why is this happening? You might wonder. This is pretty intuitive, right? So what we are doing when we reduce the cost of commuting long distance is we are essentially telling to some high-skilled individuals who would have lived in the primary city, in Paris, otherwise, we're telling them, hey, you can now move to the secondary city, and you get, you can still work, you can still reach the primary city at a lower cost now, okay? And so some of these individuals indeed do that because they can now enjoy lower housing prices in the secondary city. So some high-skilled individuals move from the primary to the secondary. They move to the secondary, but remember we have full income sorting, so they move in the central areas of the secondary city. And again, that's why we see the area occupied by the skilled expand. And what this does is it increases housing prices, and at the same time it pushes the low-income individuals towards the periphery of the secondary city, which we think is, gentrification happening. Okay, so it kind of describes in a very stylized way the gentrification taking place in the secondary city. Now, the model also predicts the opposite effects in the primary city. Okay, so in particular, it predicts that there will be a negative effect on housing prices in the primary city. Obviously, this is a very stylized model. We don't have the pretension of thinking that this can explain the whole dynamics in the housing market in Paris. And indeed, that's not what we claim. So, but when we test for the predictions of the model, we are going to focus on a particular area of Paris, and I will tell you more about this in a moment, where we're going to find effects that we think are consistent with the predictions of the model. Okay, so this is pretty much all that the theory has to say in this paper. So to summarize, we have 4 testable implications from the theory model. The first one is that the high-speed railway line, the opening of the high-speed railway lines should bring a positive effect on housing prices in the secondary cities, Bordeaux and Rennes. The second hypothesis is that we should also see a negative effect on housing prices in the primary city. Again, word of caution here, the model, although we like the model very much, we think it's great, we don't expect it to explain the housing market dynamics in the entire city of Paris. But if there is an effect, we should at least be able to pick it up in the area that is closest to the high-speed railway station that is directly affected by the new high-speed railway line, which is Montparnasse, and that's where we're going to look for the effect in particular. Okay. Okay, so moving beyond the housing market, we also have a third hypothesis that we can test, which relates more or less, it relates more to the mechanisms that are at play. So we should see the HSR line inducing more migration of skilled workers to the secondary cities from the primary. And a corollary to this hypothesis is also that we should also see more long distance travel.
Excuse me, Antonio.
Oh, yes, sorry.
Yeah,
yes.
we have a question from Morgan or Guillaume, I don't know.
Yes, please.
So, Morgan.
It was for me. Yes, no, for your point about the lowering of prices in Paris next to Montparnasse.
Yeah.
Not necessarily, because the people who are going to move to Bordeaux are people that work close to Montparnasse, that yes. So either you have something about commercial real estate because they go less to the office or something like that, because otherwise on the residential side, it could very much be that they work in Montparnasse, but they live in the 18th district, so, and there is not really a reason. I mean, I understand that your model says that there is sorting and they are close to the center, but actually, if you say that they are very rich, high-skilled workers, they are not in Montparnasse. So, I mean,
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I get the point. So first of all, we are not looking at commercial properties in the data. We're only looking at residential. But I agree that there might be some sort of spillover effects, okay, that relate to the commercial ones. As for the fact that it might not be people living close to Montparnasse, I'm not sure. I mean, when you think about it, the HSR line, what this is doing is it's making areas, the secondary cities more competitive as places to live for people that want to work in Montparnasse compared to other areas. And you would think that the main areas that would be affected are the areas that that grant easy access to Montparnasse, right? So that they
Yeah,
suffer
but
more
like,
from this competition. So
I'm
this
not
would
sure
be,
that,
yeah.
I'm sorry, maybe then you should have some supporting evidence based on some commuting flows data or something like that.
Okay.
Because I'm pretty sure that in Paris, all the people that work in Montparnasse would live half an hour away in some other district of Paris or even in the suburbs, especially the ones who would want to live. I mean, I'm not sure, but maybe you should have some evidence about who is living or not and what is the commuting pattern, because I don't have the exact data in mind, but I would be very surprised if like 80% of the people working in Montparnasse,
No, I wouldn't. Yeah, okay. I mean, I take your point. So later on, I'm going to show you evidence that the effect that we see in terms of housing is mostly concentrated relatively close to the station in terms of distance, but also that we see an effect in particular also along or close to metro stations that are directly connected to Montparnasse, which suggests that indeed there's a relation also with commuting to Montparnasse. I'll show you later, and then maybe we can get back to this.
Yeah, that point is very thank you.
But yeah, it's a good point, and we can also have a look at commercial properties, I think. So I'll talk to Gabriel about this. No problem. Thank you. Okay, so where was I? So yes, so last hypothesis that we're going to test is that the opening of the HSR line should also have an effect on the composition of the population in the neighborhoods that are affected. So we're going to look more, zooming in on certain neighborhoods, in particular the most central neighborhoods in Bordeaux and Rennes, and we are going to test whether opening the HSR line increases the share of skilled individuals that move in those neighborhoods. And at the same time, we will also check that, or whether native individuals or individuals that were originally living in those areas, or I should say more like in the cities of Bordeaux and Rennes overall, whether they became less likely to move to central neighborhoods, which again, in particular if they're low skilled. Okay, so this is basically the other side of the medal of the gentrification process, the fact that for low skilled individuals, those neighborhoods become less accessible. And of course, I mean, these are all hypotheses for which I will find support in the data, or at least I can claim, I will claim that I find support. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't even talk about them. But so you can expect to see evidence of this later on. But okay, I'll present this as we go along. Okay, so the data that we use, we have different sources of data. This, by the way, is all publicly available data from the French government or public agencies. So we have housing market data. This is very detailed housing market information about property transactions. So we have all basically the property transactions in France between January 2014 and the end of 2020. This is very detailed at the spatial level as well, right? So this is geolocalized information, and we have information about housing units in terms of, their size, the number of rooms, etc. So we can control for a number of things. We have information about residential migration. So in particular, information about the individual's location for all individuals, in terms of residence at year T and at year T -1 for the period 2013 to 2018. Okay, so the location here in this database is defined at the municipal level, and where for Paris it's arrondissement level. And we have also information about the individual's education, which allows us to distinguish between high skilled and low skilled. In the data, we also have information about commuting, so in the individual's location of residence and workplace at each year, which allows us to say at least something about commuting, although unfortunately, I don't think we have information about the, let's say, intensive margin, okay, which would also be interesting to know. I mean, how often do people commute to a certain, to their workplace? Probably this information will become available later on, but at the moment, as far as I understand, it's not there. And we also have information about residential density. So this is basically the same information in terms of where individuals live, but at a much more fine-grained level in terms of location. Okay, so it's not at the municipality level, it's at the neighborhood level, where neighborhoods are these IRIS units between 1,800 and 5,000 inhabitants. And again, we have information about individuals' education and so on and so forth. The drawback of this that data set, which you might know already, so maybe I don't even need to explain that much, is that you know where the individual was living in the previous year, but not at the neighborhood level. You only have this information at the region level, or actually at the department level. So it's not as useful to identify migration patterns. That's the the long and short of it. Okay, so in addition, we have standard information about municipalities like population, size, age, composition, and so on and so forth. Okay, so this is the data that we use. So first set of regressions that I'm going to show you concern the effect on the housing market. Okay, so the first hypothesis, the basic and probably most intuitive one, is what's the effect on housing market in the secondary cities after you open this HSR connection, excuse me. Well, we expect to see a positive effect, right? So we want to capture this effect in a causal way. Okay, so this is why we're going to do difference in difference, but we're also interested in the dynamics of the effect. So we are not just going to use the standard if in diff with a single post times treatment dummy. We are also, I mean, we are going to introduce several lags, okay, of several basically treatment dummies with lags before and after the actual treatment date, which is going to be July 2017. Okay, so when the HSR line was opened, so you can see basically the dynamics of the effect. But otherwise, it's it's diff and diff. And okay, so here our units of observation are houses, or anyway, housing units. In municipality I at time t, we're going to use quarterly data. And what else? Well, we have a number of controls for these housing units, and also at the municipality levels, like fixed effects and so on and so forth. Okay. Okay. So our treatment groups here are going to be all housing units that are in either Bordeaux or Rennes, and our control groups are going to be either housing units that are in all the other 10 largest metropolitan areas in France, except we exclude Paris and also Nantes and Toulouse. Nantes because of the proximity to Rennes, and also Toulouse because it's on the same say axis, okay, going from Paris to the southwest. So it might be incidentally treated to some extent. And then we also have another control group as a sort of robustness check, where we use all the housing units in urban areas that do not yet have a high-speed railway connection, but that according to the SNCF are supposed or are scheduled to receive an HSR connection in the future, like for example Perpignan in the south and Le Havre in the north. Okay, and this is what we find. Okay, so basically you see evidence of a significant effect. Okay, there is some anticipation. So this is our treatment, right? The treatment date, the HSR opening. There is some anticipation here, which is not surprising. I mean, the opening was obviously announced before and sometime before. But overall, basically, what this is, the result that we get says that there is an increase in about 5% in the price of the price per square meter of properties in Bordeaux and Rennes. Now it's interesting to look also at break down this result by distinguishing between apartments and houses, and we see that the most significant effect is on houses, which we think is quite consistent with the idea that people moving down from or west from Paris, they were possibly looking for more space. Okay, so they were more interested in larger housing units than in smaller ones. I mean, this is our interpretation. Maybe there are other things going on. We obviously it's just speculation here. We don't know more, but it seems consistent with this story. Okay, so what about the effect in Paris then? Okay, so like I said before, we are not going to try to estimate the effect over the entire housing market in Paris because, you know, we recognize that it's a very dynamic housing market. Paris is a huge city. So, but what we do in line, in a sense, with the prediction of the model is that we expect that if an effect is there, we should be more likely to pick it up in the areas close to the Montparnasse station, which is this one, right? So we are going to use first of all, the methodology is the same as before, so same regression model, except that our treatment units are going to be the housing units in this area, so the 2 arrondissements that are basically around Montparnasse. And our control groups are either going to be all the other arrondissements in Paris, or the ones that include only the ones that include another high-speed railway station. Okay, so these ones. Okay, and this is what we find. Okay, so you see there's a decrease in property. No, well, there's a negative effect on property prices. That's what the model tells you, which does not necessarily mean that housing prices went down. It might simply mean that compared to other areas, their growth was slowed in a sense by this HSR opening. And we are talking about an effect in the order of about 3% of the price per square meter. Okay, so like I was saying before, we check. We want to have an idea where exactly the effect is coming from. So we do 2 things. First of all, we check whether the effect changes as we move away from the HSR station, so from Montparnasse, in terms of physical distance. And it seems like indeed there is a decrease in the magnitude of the effect, which almost disappears once you get to about 3 to 4 kilometers of distance. And then what we also do is we look at connections in terms of commuting. Okay, so coming back to the previous remark. So we look at whether the effect is particularly concentrated in areas that are close to metro stations that are directly connected to the HSR station, so to Montparnasse. And again, we see that this effect tends to decay as you move to, as the location of the metro station gets farther away from the from Montparnasse. Okay, so it seems like it's the effect affects particularly the areas close in terms of physical distance, but also that are better connected. Okay, in terms of commuting to the HSR station. Okay, which we think is consistent with our hypothesis. Okay, so that's it for the housing market sort of regressions. Okay, so now let's look a little bit more at the mechanisms that might be driving these effects. Obviously, you know, I don't know if I should say this, but we understand that there might be several mechanisms going on, and with the data that we have, we can test only for some. But one in particular is migration. Where are people moving after the HSR line opening? Okay, so in particular, remember the model suggests that when you open this line, you should have high-skilled individuals who were previously living relatively close to the center, in particular the HSR station in the primary city, moving to the secondary one. So what we want to do here is we want to capture the effect of the HSR connection on the propensity of skilled individuals who were previously living in those 2 arrondissements of Paris that I mentioned before, so relatively close to Montparnasse. And we want to capture whether their propensity to migrate to the cities of Bordeaux and Rennes changed and we want to capture this in a differential way. So in particular, comparatively to the propensity of migrating for low-skilled individuals, and also the propensity of migrating to other areas. Okay, so because it could also be that, you know, opening this HSR line just made individuals or skilled individuals more likely to migrate away from Paris and also somewhere else. Okay, so what we do is we do triple differences. Okay, so this is a specification where we drop the event study approach. It's a pure diff in diff in diff, where the key interaction term, where the key coefficient that we are interested in is this one, which relates to the interaction between the post-treatment, the skill level, and whether individuals are migrating indeed to either Bordeaux or Rennes. So cities that are affected by this HSR connection opening. Okay. And so what do we find? We find that, again, remember, we use as control groups either the top 10 metropolitan areas in France, or areas that have high HSR potential in the future, like I mentioned before for the housing market. And we find that there is a positive effect. Okay, so it seems like indeed opening the HSR line made individuals that were previously living in this part of Paris, close to Montparnasse, more likely to move compared to low-skilled individuals, but also compared to moving to other areas, more likely to move to Bordeaux and Rennes. A related regression that we run is also regarding commuting flows. Okay, so we check basically with a similar specification whether high-skilled individuals became also more likely to commute between Bordeaux and Rennes and this particular area of Paris, and we again see a positive effect, which suggests that at most 15% commute on a very frequent basis, however. So overall, I think the picture here is that, yes, there is an increasing long distance commuting, but not very large, at least on a regular basis. Yes, please. Sorry.
Morgan, I have another question.
Yes, please, Morgan.
No, this time it's Guillaume. Sorry.
Okay. Sorry.
Thank you. I was just wondering why you're dropping the event study. So I understand why, but why don't you? Why don't you take the data from the census of 2005 as well? Because the census did not change that much.
Oh, so you can. Okay, so what you're suggesting is we can go back to even before.
You could, because I think you are aware of this because you are using 2013 and 2018, so you have only 2 years. Because you are only allowed to compare years from 5 by 5, but I would test the pre-trend, like doing 2005 to 2008 before, also to check for that.
Okay, that's a good suggestion. I'll discuss this with Gabriel, and that's probably something that we can do. Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so yes, okay, so last hypothesis, and then I'm done. So now what we want to know is also something about how the composition of the population within the cities that are apparently becoming gentrified changed. Okay, and so in particular, what we can do with the data that we have is we can test how the share of skilled individuals among the people that moved into these central neighborhoods, the most central parts of Bordeaux and Rennes, changed after the opening of the HSR line. Okay, and our model suggests that this share should increase. Okay, so what we do is, again, like I said, we're going to compare the share of skilled in movers in the either 3 or 5 most central neighborhoods in Bordeaux and Rennes to the share of skilled in movers in the other neighborhoods of the same cities over several years. Okay, so So here again, we have the same approach as in the previous two regressions, but obviously we're not talking about housing market units anymore. We're talking about a share of individuals moving into neighborhoods. Okay, so the dependent variable here is the share of skilled workers among in-movers. Okay, well, what we find is that there is again seemingly a positive effect. Okay, we see an increase that is statistically significant, about 7% increase in the share of skilled workers in central Bordeaux and Rennes, which seems consistent again with the idea that those areas became increasingly gentrified.
Sorry, Antonio.
Yeah,
we
please.
have another question of Guillaume.
Yes, please.
Yeah. So here, you are using the census data also for this, but here you are using the event study. So
yeah. So
this puzzles me a little bit because you are only supposed to compare it like from 2013 to 2018,
but
and actually then it's very hard to interpret like the dynamics before.
Yeah, sure. But I thought that this data was available at the yearly level, right? Or is it not?
Yeah, no, but actually they publish it every year, but
Yeah,
it's a rolling census. So then actually when you do comparison, you are only actually it's very significant only when you compare from every 5 years.
I see. Well, so you know what? I think you see this coefficient here. Actually, the number, the 7.7% that I gave. This is the coefficient that you get if you just run the standard difference in difference regression. So with the before and after.
Yeah, exactly.
So there you still see an effect. Okay.
Yeah, the idea is just it might be worth to go back.
Yeah.
Further before 2013.
Yeah.
Because the pre-trend here are very tricky to interpret. Given that you are supposed only to compare census waste from 5 years to 5 years.
I see.
That's what an INSEE guy would tell you when you think those data. So here I'm playing the role of the INSEE guy.
Okay. Well, no, thank you. It's good to know. Okay, so the last thing I want to show you, and then I'm done, is basically the regression that tells you sort of the other side of the story in terms of gentrification. Okay, so here what we're looking at is the probability that unskilled individuals that were living in the area of Bordeaux and Rennes move to the central areas, okay, of these cities, again before and after the opening of the HSR line. And you see this probability decreases. Okay, so what this is suggesting is that I mean, like I said, it's basically the other part of the same story. Okay, so on the one hand you have a higher share of skilled individuals among the people that move into this neighborhood, and at the same time you also see that the individuals that were natives, in a sense, so they were living there in those urban areas before. They now find it harder to move to the central areas. Okay, so it seems like these areas are becoming less accessible, in a sense, to unskilled individuals. Okay, and I suppose similar concerns apply also to this regression. So we can check this this as well. Let me write this down. Okay, but this is it. So what we have done is developed a model of second-hand gentrification with heterogeneous individuals that locate in a primary and a secondary city. So the fundamental idea of the model is that the high-speed railway connection makes the primary more accessible from individuals that live in the secondary cities, and that this accessibility benefits the skilled more than it does to the unskilled. Okay, so one thing I would like to mention is that here we have made it entirely a story about commuting and job opportunities. Okay, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. Okay, so it could also be that you know, there are amenities involved, and so if I'm a high-skilled individual, I value certain amenities that are in Paris more than an unskilled one, say, I don't know, theaters, whatever, museums, etc. And again, the fact that now you have this connection that allows me to access these amenities even from time to time, even when I'm living farther away from Paris, this is perhaps more valuable to me than it is to the unskilled individual. So this can also play a role. Okay, so this could be an alternative explanation or a complementary one. Okay, so I mean, we have a little theoretical model that we validate, at least we think we find support for the model in our empirical analysis using the HSR opening of these railway lines connecting Paris to the west of the country. And yeah, so we find important effects in Bordeaux and Rennes, but also evidence of, yeah, this is a bit wrong in the sense that it's not necessarily reduced housing prices, but more like a negative effect on prices in the Paris-Montparnasse area. Okay, so this is all. Yeah, I'm open to your questions, and thank you very much for your attention and for the question that I already got.
Thank you, Antonio, for your very interesting presentation. And we have time for a question. I know what the first question is for Morgan or Guillaume. Again.
Yeah.
No, vas-y, Guillaume, j'en prie.
So yeah, thank you very much. It's a super interesting paper. With two quick comments or slash thoughts. But the first one on maybe useful and the way to improve regarding this data side. There is a second data set that allows you to follow not commuting patterns, but at least people moving from one year to the other, which is Fidelity. Which is unfortunately only available on the CASD box, like this high security stuff where you have to put your fingerprints. But with this, you have yearly data, exhaustive, where where people were living at n-1 and when they are living right now. Yeah, it's a pseudo panel, and you can, when you ask, if ever you ask for those data, it might be, you should pay attention because you can also, it's a pseudo panel. So for every year, you have the information of the fiscal household at T-1 and T. But you can also ask the advanced version where they just provide you the panel from 2014 up to 2020. So for you, it might be nice because on top of that, you can have, they publish it quicker than the census. So you can have more years to see what happens in 2019 and maybe COVID. Like then you can probably say something about COVID shock, whether it was even used more. So it might be a nice extension.
Can you say the name of the
it's called Fidelity, Fideli.
Yeah, Fidelity. Okay. Yes.
And second comment more was regarding your results. Something puzzled us. That your results are on the housing prices. Your results are mostly driven by housing prices, on house and not apartments. And I was thinking your model predicts an impact on the city center. And like if you have been to Bordeaux or Rennes, like houses around the cities, the Bordeaux Saint-Jean, Bordeaux Saint-Jean, yeah, exactly, or Rennes, like
there's not much.
Mostly flats. Like you have to get at some point. So this is what puzzled us.
No, it's a good point. It's a good point. I agree.
Because what it could be is you have developers that have this anticipation effect that people are gonna. Might be also housing supply elasticity story. Like developers anticipate the demand is gonna boom for apartments, so they anticipate even more, so they start buying those few houses that remain and like they crash it down and put high flat apartments. So maybe also an outcome that you could look at, and you can look at this in those data. You have what is called VEFA in this data set, which is vente en état futur d'achèvement, which is new buildings. So maybe you have like the housing supply reaction, and they start to develop, and the share of new apartments in the total sales is increasing because there is a boost in housing supply or stuff like that. Might be, which is 100% compatible with your model, because if you have higher increase in price in the center, it should densify. But then if you have supply adjustment, the effect on price is more ambiguous. But still, because it densified, it means that at least land prices are higher. So that's totally fine.
Yeah, okay. That's I mean, both comments are great. It's
and third, would you consider to use your, because you talk about welfare, first, would you consider to use your model to, I think it would be nice, like a model or a more twisted, realistic version of it to have welfare analysis to say in the end who lose, who earns, because then you have also this second fact that like the poor households are sometimes owning their flat and selling it to the rich Parisians and benefiting from this. So in total, like should they really be mad about this or not? Like this is really something that is fascinating. Our economics point, they go, okay, yes, for sure, prices are increasing and so on. But welfare, like saying that you can see, but the winner is not always a Parisian in this case.
And on that, I'm sorry, on that point about welfare, actually, we jump to kind of my comments. If you think about the welfare effect for the poor people that are forced to move, I was thinking, okay, maybe there is a commuting time effect, like you are forced to move away from the center. And that maybe you could check, especially there is another data set that is interesting, where you have the universe of workers, of employed people, and also you know how much they make, so you can do something that is a bit like more, you know, heterogeneity by income level and so on, which is called DADS, and where you have also where they are living and where they are working and where they were living and working last year. You know, so maybe, and then you can have something about, okay, does it increase their commuting time or something like that? That would be, you know, if you want to really look for welfare points. And then I was thinking also, if you go to what Guillaume was suggesting, or even to the others, then you have also wages, because one comment that you might hear is maybe there is some form of trickle down effect where you have richer people that come, so they have some form of services, and then you have like all of those support jobs of the city that actually they might somehow benefit from that. So maybe you could have income as an outcome of like of some of the regressions if you go to those fidelity data and stuff like that.
Yeah, so that's true. Okay, so I mean, so there are several points about welfare that you made, and I think so. First of all, starting from the last one, this is an interesting point. We are working on an extension to the theoretical model to incorporate this aspect, this sort of spillovers between the high income or the high skilled and the low skilled. So having more high skilled makes it, I don't know, increases the demand for low skilled labor also as well. But yeah, then we have to think about a little bit how to capture this also in the empirics. And I think with this additional data that we can look at, there's probably something we can do on that. Now, an overall welfare analysis, I mean, to some extent, the model allows you to say something about welfare as it is, the model as it is, I mean, in the sense that you can already see in terms of utility, which groups are benefiting and which ones aren't. Of course, here in the model, you know, it's all very stylized, and so you don't have, so for example, you don't have homeowners versus renters.
Yeah, exactly. And this is a super interesting point, I think, in the end. Who took the rent, like from the benefits from because if the guys that sell, the Parisians that sell, in the end, they made some capital, small probably, because then actually this is an effect on top of the huge price increase in Paris. So they did a small capital, a smaller capital gain when reselling in Paris. On top of that, you have like probably part of the capital gain is eaten by taxes and so on and so forth at transaction that they pay upfront when they bought first and when they resell, and then they pay twice. I think the big winner is the state in the end. For taxation, maybe. But then you probably have those rent guy and those that might have benefited from it, like and if it's also housing supply, houses conversion story and so on and so on, then it will be very few people having those houses that will take a lot, and it might be interesting to have something to say about this.
Yeah, and you have also quality of housing issues. You know, like you had some buildings in Bordeaux where you did not want to live there before it gentrified.
Yeah.
Because because it was like borderline, you know, health hazard in terms of you know mold and everything, you know. So
no, it's I mean, these are all good points. I mean, so the problem with welfare analysis, I mean, that's what we thought, at least at the beginning, and maybe there's more that we can do with this, is that so where do you stop, in the sense that, okay, so there is that, there are all the things that you mentioned, but then you can also think of, okay, so who is really paying for the HSR connection? So you know, the money comes from the state, but then
but I think at least the welfare, like with the 3 standard ingredients of a Rosen and Robach model, like wage, land rent, and capital gains, like amenities and capital gains. That's I think that's enough because the models remain stylized, but like having a small corner of I think it's just been like more fancy in having a small corner of the table computation, saying in the end maybe the winners are not the one, like it's it's ambiguous, like, you know, like you say, well, following your estimates, maybe it's in between, maybe you should slightly change the parameter, it's gonna be positive or negative, but like not to be conclusive, but to have a kind of order of magnitude of the effects.
I get it.
It's just for more than curiosity that we want to know more than
no,
we are super excited.
It's already very interesting, but then we are like on it, you know,
because we want to go to the bar and say to the guy, we say, no, you know, Parisians, they should housing price, to say, but you always have this thing. I come from this region actually, and I say, but who is the guy who sold the flat to the Parisians?
Okay, but thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We have time for another question. So, Flavia.
Hi, thank you for your presentation.
Yes.
I wanted to know if, specifically for the ever study definitive, does it work if you consider only Rennes or only Bordeaux? And did you plan to extend it to not only the city itself, but also the agglomeration, that is the municipalities directly connected to Bordeaux or Rennes?
Okay, so I mean, I don't see why not. I don't see why it shouldn't work if we only have, let me see if I have something about this. No, I don't think we do. Okay, well, whatever. But I don't see why it shouldn't work. Just looking at one of the 2 cities rather than both. And including other cities in the agglomeration, I don't think we have done it. I don't think we checked. Or maybe Gabriel did, like, you know, as just before choosing what exactly we wanted to focus on. But we can definitely do it. So these are both things that we can easily check. So I don't think it should be a problem. But thank you. But so can I just ask, why do you think that focusing on just one city, we could have, so for example, what could we be missing by looking at both together? Maybe because you think that the dynamics are not the same in the two cities?
Yeah, actually, I tried to replicate the results. For Bordeaux, it works well, but for Rennes,
It
the
doesn't.
effect is smaller. And actually, the event study definitive shows an increase which comes later in 2019 and 20. So maybe I made some mistakes, but I have the feeling that the effect is internalized in the prices later for Rennes, maybe due to the pandemic, or I don't know why. But because Bordeaux is bigger than Rennes, even if the effect is smaller for Rennes, you don't see it when you mix the data of Bordeaux and Rennes.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll have a look at that. Thank you very much.
Thank
Yes.
you. Morgan?
No. Yeah, no, just a quick reaction on
Let
this.
other people ask questions, Guillaume.
we might have an explanation for an heterogeneity between Rennes and Bordeaux. So I have a paper with Jean-Benoît Emeud and Clara Wolf, where we estimate the housing supply elasticity of the French cities. And actually, Rennes is super elastic, and Bordeaux is super inelastic.
Okay.
Might be a point, potential explanation.
Okay. Yeah, we'll investigate that. We'll have a look. Yeah. Thank you.
We have time for one or two questions again.